Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Save the Bay podcast. As always, I am here with Adam Kowarski, the aquarium manager and education specialist at Save the Bay.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
I am also joined today by Abby Green, who is our communications intern for the summertime. Abby, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You have been behind the scenes for a while now, and now we want you to come on, and you'll be running the next podcast, so I won't be here next time.
That's awesome.
It's going to be just you and it's going to be just you and Abby.
Yeah, she's more fun. So
you know what?
I'm just kidding.
And I am Matt Vieira. I am the social media and marketing manager. So let's get right into it. As always, Adam, what is this month's theme?
This next month's theme, everyone, are you ready? It's sharks.
All right. Okay.
Dun.
Which I'm very excited for. Sharks are just a fascination people have had for a long, long time. If you take a look at historic maps of different waterways, even from like medieval times, they have pictures of sharks they've drawn as sea monsters and all these things. So it's just an interest that's always been a great one to get into education-wise for sure. Especially to let people know they're not all monsters is a good thing to do too.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of monsters, one of my favorite movies, the main antagonist is a shark. I don't know what movie you know.
I think I know what movie you're talking about.
Maybe?
Yeah, we're still working on that one.
Unfortunately, gave a very bad name to sharks everywhere.
Yeah,
but we're hoping here at the aquarium, at the Exploration Center and Aquarium down here in Newport, we're going to change that.
Yeah, we can continue on creating this great image that the sharks really should have, you know. One way we do that is by exhibiting sharks here that are completely harmless, and they're actually the most common sharks that we get in Narragansett Bay. You know, one of the neat things about our bay is no large predatory sharks can make it into our bay really effectively. Average depth of the bay is only about 25 feet, which doesn't leave enough room for something like a great white or something else like that to hunt effectively.
So they need a little bit of a deeper
water because they're ambush predators, right? So they hide in the depths. They wait for something to come by, like a seal or a fish, because that's their favorite food, and then they come out of the depths and swoop up on them, or they kind of come down from the top if they're hiding in the surface waters as well.
I did not know that.
And 25 feet, it's just not cutting it.
Yeah. That's not. You can't get a sneak up on any
that's
seals
nothing.
like that.
Yeah, everything can be seen. And so that's why in our bay, the largest sharks we get are only about 3.5 to 4.5 feet long on average. Different kinds of dogfish sharks, and most of them don't even have teeth that could even puncture your skin. I've literally felt the jaws of all of them to see what they're like, and they couldn't even hurt you if they wanted to.
Really. So we have some dogfish sharks here at the aquarium.
Yes, yeah. So currently we're housing two species. One is a smooth dogfish shark, and that one is about 3 feet long. The other one is a chain cat shark or chain dogfish. That one's about 1.5 feet long. Yeah, so we got the cat and dog shark, which I think is kind of fun.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yep, and they're a lot of fun. And just like cats and dogs, the cat shark is much smaller, full grown, only 1.5 feet long. Oh. So these guys are teeny tiny. They just have these smooth little plates in their mouth, and they'll kind of suck up their prey, which will be like crabs and worms and injured fish, and they scavenge a bit as well. And then they have kind of crushing plates in the back of their throat that help crush up the shells and things.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, what is the main characteristic besides size? How would you be able to tell these two different sharks apart?
Yeah, so the chain cat shark, if you look at it, it's kind of a tan and black pattern. The black parts of the pattern are almost in like a chain link pattern. That's where it gets kind of the chain name. You look at their eyes, too, and they have almost the shape of like cat eyes, kind of like a rounded oval sort of shape to them. Okay. So that's kind of probably where they get the cat sort of name as well. The smooth dogfish shark, which is actually much more active. This shark does a lot more swimming than the chain cat shark, which usually spends most of his time on the bottom. But the smooth dogfish swims around. It's very active. They get much bigger, but they have they look more like a classic shark. So they have the gray coloration on top, the lighter counter shading of white underneath as well.
I read that sometimes we get blue sharks and mako sharks. Is that accurate?
So we actually get most species of large predatory sharks coming through the Rhode Island Sound, which can be hundreds of feet deep in many places, and it's actually a very effective place for them to hunt, which I think is really amazing. So once you get out of the bay, out of Narragansett Bay, into the Rhode Island Sound, that's when you start to see things like short fin makos and blue sharks and thresher sharks, even great whites. We get those around there too. All kinds of amazing sharks moving through there seasonally. One that I think is really cool that you just mentioned is the mako, short fin mako, fastest shark in the world.
Yeah, those are cool sharks.
Moves through the Rhode Island waters, which is way too cool.
That's cool. Do you know how fast they can move up to?
You know what? I got to double check. I want to say it's something like 40 miles an hour. Or
That's
something
quick.
Like that. But they're moving and grooving. And correct, I could be wrong on that number, so we should have our guests maybe can double check that one and comment and let me know if I'm wrong.
Okay. Okay. So here at the aquarium we have the chain cat sharks and the dogfish sharks.
Yep.
People are able to come and pet the dogfish sharks right in our touch tank, our large shark touch tank.
Yeah.
Can you give a little like what that's kind of like?
Someone
that might be nervous. We're
right.
trying to tear the veil off of sharks. And
I was nervous a few weeks ago when I did it.
Yeah.
But when you hear pet a shark, it's not.
It sounds like maybe I shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah. So you want to kind of fill people in on what that's kind of like?
Yeah. So we have experienced interns and volunteer educators that are always over at our Shark Tank, teaching you the best way to do this. So these sharks here, like I said, they're not dangerous at all. You can actually handle them as long as you're gentle and nice to them. They actually are fragile, so we got to treat them with respect as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't think of sharks as something that's fragile, but they actually can be. So you can come here. You can learn how to pet them, learn why they're such a cool animal, and that not all of them are dangerous. We don't need to be scared. Just because you might see like small sharks in the bay doesn't mean we need to be worried about the safety of our kids or any of the adults or our pets or anything like that. So here you can really just see how non-confrontational they are.
Great. What other shark activities are going on at the aquarium?
Yeah, so we got some good
stuff.
ones. My favorite one is one that one of our staff came up a while ago with. This is a great one. It's called Robo Shark.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tell me more, Adam.
And it sounds kind of funny, right? So this is actually a way to kind of teach about climate change a little bit, as weird as it sounds. So we have our guests, whoever's participating in this activity, imagine what our planet might be like maybe 100,000 years in the future, something like that. Climate change has gone through its course, maybe humans are still here and technology is very different. Maybe there's different kinds of animals in the sea, maybe less fish because of pollution or overfishing, that kind of thing. And their goal is to craft a shark that might live in a habitat like this with different adaptations to live in a future that is this different. So I've gotten some really creative ones. One of my favorites, I wish I had the picture with me, but one of my favorites a third grader made, and it was a robo shark, and what he did, he had special nets to catch garbage, trash in the water. He took the garbage, he used it to raise fish for himself. He figured out how to feed the fish garbage, and then he would eat the fish. And he would, it was like a farming shark that would use plastic. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Did it have a name? Did they have a name?
It had such a creative name, but I wish I could remember it. It was a great one.
I can imagine when people start coming in July and for the shark theme and start making their robo sharks, you're going to have some interesting ones.
Yeah, and any good ones, come in and make sure you guys are making good ones. All the good ones, we're going to post them right up on the wall so people can see, how sharks might deal with climate change.
And also, we'll get them and throw them up on social media if you want to. We can scan them in, take photos of them, and we'll get them up on social media. Yeah. So watch out on Twitter and Facebook for that as well. Robo sharks coming.
Oh yeah, love Robo Shark.
What is there anything else at the aquarium right now to do with sharks?
So we'll have themed scavenger hunts, all having to do with shark information. So for those of you who are a little older, might not be interested in making a craft, you can learn a lot more information about the shark. So we're going to put up different types of signage about different shark species and things like that. You can walk around the aquarium. We have basically a whiteboard you walk around with. It gives you clues to figure out all of the answers to the questions that we're going to be asking. And if you can actually finish it and complete it, which is not an easy task, it's a tough scavenger hunt, you actually win prizes at the front desk.
Oh, very cool.
Really
and one animal that's included in this month's theme that we haven't mentioned yet is the skates, right? They're also involved in all these activities.
Yeah, exactly. So skates are in the same family as sharks. Thanks for reminding me, because I totally forgot about that part. We can't forget about the skates.
Can't forget about skates.
They're in the same family called chondrichthyes, which basically means animals that have a cartilaginous skeleton.
Okay.
Right? Because humans people, mammals, reptiles, fish. We have what are known as true bones, right? That's that calcium base and everything. And then if you like wiggle your ears, guys, you can wiggle your ears, wiggle your nose, you know. That's all that cartilage there. Entire shark and skate skeleton made of that stuff. So we have skates here, which are actually doing some amazing stuff as well. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see what the skates have been doing lately, but we have a bunch of skate touch tanks here, and the females have been very productive. They've been laying eggs by the hundreds. Just
oh my
about.
God, the baby skates are so cute.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
cute.
And the eggs are doing great. You can actually see them with lights behind them. You can watch the embryo develop when you come
That's
here.
fantastic.
And they've been hatching out too in large numbers.
That's great.
Yeah, and we've been slowly releasing them back into the bay as we're getting healthy ones born here that are large enough
That's
to kind
awesome.
of fend for
How
themselves.
many do you think you've released?
So right now, this is a fairly new program for us that we're working on here. So we've only released one at this point.
Oh.
Yeah. But that one, is maybe a year and a half old, something like that. So it takes a while to get to that size. That was the very first one, actually, that we had hatch here, which was just awesome.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, so cool. And the other ones, they're all coming. They're teeny tiny still, so they're getting there.
That's very cool. So you can come see the baby skates. You can come. There's a touch tank for skates. There's a touch tank for sharks. Very, very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, we got a lot of fun this next month.
Awesome. Abby, do you have any other shark questions or shark information that you want to share?
Let's think. I know that they're supposed to be an apex predator of the bay. So how are they important in Narragansett Bay if they aren't like hunting them down and like hiding in the shadows? How do they hunt? Like how are they still the predator?
So Narragansett Bay, again, like because it is so shallow, we just don't have a lot of large predators. In the wintertime, seals are probably the apex predator in Narragansett Bay, but they're here seasonally. So during the times when the seals aren't here, things like the spiny dogfish shark, the smooth dogfish shark, those guys are probably some of our apex predators, along with things like striped bass, which I don't know if we can see him. Yeah, we got a striped bass right behind me.
He's big.
Right there, the Rhode Island State fish, that guy there. He's another apex predator in the bay as well.
Okay.
It's just because, and he gets to be maybe about 5 feet long, full grown, something like that. So that's a pretty good size too. Just not a lot of huge predatory animals. So those sharks, they're going to scavenge, but they'll also do some hunting. They'll get schooling fish and whatever fish they can kind of get. So that's kind of how they fall into that role.
I had that question, and then I wanted to know about the story that you guys are having. It's Shark Baby, right?
Yes, is the title. I think the title's Shark Baby.
Yeah.
And the story time is actually a lot more fun than people might think. It's not just a regular story time, right? We make it interactive. We have all different animal cutouts of the different creatures that are featured in the stories and the characters. Cool. So anyone participating in story time, they can actually act out the story. They put it up on the felt board.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and everything we do is hands-on and interactive, and this is just another way that we try and keep it fresh.
And then speaking of interactive, with Feeding Frenzy, that's this month, right?
Yes, we have Feeding Frenzy as well, and it's every third Thursday, and it's...
I believe that's the 21st.
21st. Every third Thursday of each month we do Feeding Frenzy, and so far they've all been a huge hit, tons of fun, but this month, you can actually feed the sharks too when you come.
That's
so you
awesome.
come to Feeding Frenzy, you feed tons of animals that are here, including the sharks, which is a lot of fun. So you can register for that right online, savebay.org/aquarium. I recommend pre-registering because it definitely fills up quick.
We've had a bunch of sellouts.
Yeah, most of them have been sold out, and the ones that weren't sold out were just about. So.
What do we feed the sharks?
So since these sharks are scavengers in the bay, we're giving them a collection of things like herring, mackerel, squid, butterfish, shrimp, krill, that kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
A lot of it's actually donated by local fishermen, too, which is cool.
Very cool.
Either donated or given to us at a nice, big, non-profit discount, which is nice.
Oh, that's good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So story time, scavenger hunts, you have the feedings, you have the petting the sharks, you have
Petting
the
the skates. Seeing them as babies.
So yeah, seeing them as babies. A lot going on for the shark theme for July.
Yeah, it's going to be tons of fun, and now that we're really into our summer season, the beach is beautiful. Come check out the beach too. Mm-hmm. We're open every day 10 to 4. There's food here, there's carousel, all sorts of stuff. It's a really great just whole day for anyone, really. There's something for all ages. So.
If you're down in Newport and you're near Easton's Beach, if you're in Newport, you're near Easton's Beach, so come down and see the Exploration Center and Aquarium. This week we're actually down at, Monday, we were down Narrow River with Wenley out on a salt marsh doing some removing some water from the salt marsh.
That's one of my favorite things to do.
So we weren't actually doing the digging, but there was.
Matt almost sunk though.
I almost was gone. I almost was lost into
His
the
boot
marsh.
was pretty close.
Man, then
to
you'd have
coming
to
off.
take over the podcast.
Yep, that would be it.
Yeah.
So we were down with Wenley and Dave and one of our volunteers, Amanda /interns. So
Yes.
we're gonna cut to that interview right now, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up here.
Wonderful.
Hi, everybody. I am here with Wenley Ferguson, the restoration coordinator at Save the Bay. Wenley, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming out today, Matt.
And where are we today?
We are on the Narrow River. We're on the Narragansett side of the Narrow River, just south of the Kayak Center in Middlebridge. People know this area. They refer to it as Middlebridge.
And what are we doing out here?
I'm working with Dave Prescott, our South Coast keeper, and one of our interns, Amanda Prue, and we are actually hand digging small little creeks to drain water off the marsh surface. And the reason we're doing that is with sea level rise, we're seeing more and more water on our salt marshes. And salt marshes are adapted to flood twice a day, but they can't grow with standing water. So what we're trying to do is hand dig these small channels, or what we call runnels, to drain some of this trapped or impounded water off the marsh.
And that's the technique you're using at this marsh. But I understand that at other marshes, there are other techniques to help with this as well.
At other marshes around the state, in Middletown, Ninigret, in Charlestown, and actually this area just a little south of where we're standing on the Narrow River, we're using a new technique which has never been done in the state until this winter, where we're bringing in sand and actually elevating the marsh surface with sand, either from an upland source like the Statuesque Marsh in Middletown, or in the case of the Narrow River and Ninigret Pond down in Charlestown, in the fall and winter of this coming year, we're going to be dredging material from the river or from the breachway at Ninigret and bringing the sand up onto the marsh surface, the dredge material, and spreading it very evenly, only a few inches, to raise the elevation of the marsh to create more what we call high marsh habitat, which you can kind of see in the distance. It's what they used to hay. It's called salt marsh hay. Most of this marsh historically used to be salt marsh hay, but a lot of the marsh is transitioning to what we call low marsh vegetation, which is flooded more regularly. We're standing right now in a mixture of low and high marsh, so it shows that a transition is occurring. And that transition, the vegetation, the plants are changing because with sea level rise, it's getting more and more flooded. So the high marsh vegetation can only get flooded a few times a month, but now that these areas are getting flooded more regularly, it's transitioning or changing to more low marsh vegetation that can flood twice a day.
And how do you determine what marsh gets the digging treatment, or, to put it generally, or the raising of the marsh?
That's a good question. So we have been doing this the digging of creeks, both by hand as well as with, we partner with the Department of Environmental Management's Mosquito Abatement Program. They have a low ground pressure excavator, and this is a small piece of equipment, a small excavator that we use, and we've used it out here last spring and again last winter, and this spring too. So starting in 2015, with the small bucket that the excavator has, they dig these very shallow ditches or creeks, and we're not trying to dig very deep ditches like they used to historically for mosquito control. We know that's not a good technique. We're just trying to drain a little bit of that water to reduce both the standing water that I mentioned, which not only is bad for the plants, it also creates mosquito breeding habitats. So that's why we partner with DEM. So on the Narrow River, this marsh that we're on is part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge, the Chaffee Refuge. We're partnering with U.S. Fish and Wildlife on this project, doing both creeks and runnels in this section of the marsh, and then to the south, the dredging is going to occur in the southern area, and they're going to bring what we call, it's both elevation enhancement or thin layer deposition, a thin layer of sand deposited on the marsh. That is planned for next fall, and the reason why we do more of the creek and hand digging. It's a much simpler project. You can do it in any marsh area. We've done projects down on Winnipesaukee Pond in Westerly, Jamestown, Round Marsh, Hog Island, and in Bristol, and Warren, Jacobs Point Marsh, and a few others. These are projects that it doesn't take a lot of effort to get a small excavator onto the marsh or bring volunteers with shovels. It takes a lot of effort to figure out a site for dredging and marsh elevation using sand. It's a much more costly project, as well as there's not necessarily a sand source readily available. So on the Narrow River, we happen to have a sand source being the channel, the Narrow River itself. Down in Ninigret, the Ninigret Breachway, they're proposing to dredge the breachway for navigational purposes. So why not use that sand instead of putting it back on the beach, put it on the marsh to raise the elevation? And actually, we're probably going to do a combination of both, some marsh elevation and beach renourishment down at Ninigret.
Great. Thanks, Wenley. So let's catch up with Dave and Amanda, and let's see some of the work that we've done here at Narrow River.
So, Matt, we're in a spot where last spring, 2015, the area where we're standing had a few inches of water. And this is one of those impounded water areas. And there was no vegetation, no grasses growing. So in this case, this is a little hand-dug runnel right here leading out to a creek. There's Dave and Amanda just maintaining what we dug last year. And it has allowed this area to drain off, and the grasses here have recolonized now that it's drained, which is a good sign. It's still somewhat stressed, there's no question, but we've seen a lot of recolonization of this area.
So that's the goal of what you're doing here.
Exactly, that's the goal. So as we head back, we'll walk through areas that have fully recolonized, and all you can see is the little creek. You can't see any of the bare areas, so that's a great sign. And this leads down to an existing creek that drains out to the Narrow River. So we're just helping to try to facilitate some natural drainage which used to occur on its own. In this little runnel that Dave and Amanda were maintaining, digging out a little bit more, they're tiny little fish, and these fish are key for feeding on the mosquito larvae. So it's a great sign that the fish are using this little runnel, and I believe, Dave, they might be baby mummy chugs.
Yeah,
I think so.
Hopefully little mummies.
And now an adult mummy chug would not be able to live here because it's too shallow, but the fact that it is providing some habitat for fish that will feed on those mosquito larvae is another real added benefit of all these adaptation projects that we're doing. So Matt, here we're standing in what's called a salt marsh meadow. This is the high marsh, and this is the grass that they used to hay, salt marsh hay. Sometimes they would have cattle graze out here, and actually there's stone walls on the marsh which are a sign that they used to graze cattle. Clearly our marshes have degraded over the last 50 years because it's hard for us to walk around on the marsh surface, let alone a cow. So, but the reason why this habitat's so important, there are a couple species of bird that only nest in this high marsh habitat. One's a salt marsh sparrow, and they create their nest right in the grass. They create a little dome so that if the tide comes up, the eggs don't float away. But what's happening with sea level rise, these high marsh zones are getting smaller and smaller, and the salt marsh sparrow are losing their habitat. And the other bird that nests in this area is a willet. It's a type of shorebird. So one of the major goals of these restoration projects, along with reducing mosquito breeding habitat, is trying to restore some of the salt marsh, high marsh habitat, and that's why we're going to the great lengths of actually bringing in sand to raise the elevation, because we want to try to restore this type of condition, this high marsh. Matt, what's interesting here, we've gotten drainage of this area through this little creek, but this is an area where I'm standing. You can see I'm much lower. What's happened as water sat on the marsh, trapped, the vegetation dies, the plants die. There's nothing holding that peat or the salt marsh soil together, and the marsh literally begins to sink. So I'm at a much lower elevation than just actually further. I'm at a lower elevation than the bay or the river, the narrow river, which is a tidal river here closer to the upland. So it's very hard to get drainage when you have had water sitting on the marsh. And you can see where my feet are. I'm sinking in about 4 inches because there's just nothing holding this peat. So it is a challenge to try to get drainage in these really degraded conditions.
Okay, Wenley, what are we looking at?
Okay, I forgot to mention one other adaptation technique, and it's the key adaptation technique. It's marsh migration. So sea level's rising, our coastal habitats are moving inland, and we have an example of it right here. We're right at the edge of the high marsh going into an area of shrubs. This is called high tide bush because it can get inundated with moon tides, bigger tides of the year. And then when you look in the distance, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but there are a lot of dead trees in the distance. As salt water is moving further inland, it's killing off some of the vegetation that isn't salt tolerant. And that's an area for the marsh to migrate into the future as sea level rise. The problem is in New England, not just Rhode Island, throughout New England, we don't have real gentle slopes along our coastal areas. The narrow river in particular has very steep sided slopes. If you look over on the east side, there's residential development, but it's a very steep bank. So that marsh is going to get to a point where it's not going to be able to migrate inland. But we're working right now to identify some of these low-lying areas and figuring out what we can do to help that marsh to migrate. There might be an old stone wall, or there might be an old footpath or road that's preventing that marsh from migrating. What adaptation can we do so that it has a path to move inland? And that's another key component of adaptation to sea level rise for our salt marshes. So Matt, we are standing on an area that is a pilot project for what we're calling thin layer deposition, the other technique to raise the elevation of the marsh, or the only technique to raise the elevation of the marsh to keep pace with the increased rate of sea level. And Coastal Resources Management Council last spring in 2015, in coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we're still on the wildlife refuge, they brought sand from an upland source, and they created a slurry of the sand, and they piped it over here and deposited the sand on the marsh. And the marsh, they actually raised the elevation a few inches. And right at my feet is some of the vegetation that's growing up through the sand that was placed here. None of this was planted. It's actually either reseeded, or some of it could have actually just come up through it was growing below and was able to grow through the sand.
So the two ways that we talked about today to help out salt marshes is the thin layer deposition, how you just explained how you put sand and sand on the marsh, and then the other is the digging, the what do you call the trenches?
The creeks and small runnels. The runnels are what we call the ones that we do by hand because they are so small.
And the others you do with the excavator.
Exactly. And we only work with the excavator outside of the growing season because of the birds nesting. And so we work with the excavator in the spring and the fall.
So with this particular marsh, you are using a little bit of both techniques for that.
And even here, standing on this area where the sand was brought in, just this morning we worked on digging some creeks to drain some water that's surrounding the area where the sand was placed last spring. So it's definitely a combo approach. If you have the opportunity to use the sand, we're trying to look at drainage as well after the sand's placed.
Great. So what restoration projects are coming up, and who are we working with? Because we do not do this alone, correct?
No, every project has partners. On this project, it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They're the lead, and they're collaborating with Save the Bay. The Nature Conservancy is working with them on contracting out the thin layer deposition. As I mentioned, DEM Mosquito Abatement Program, Al Getman, he's the one you hear from. He does the testing for West Nile virus. We partner with him. And then on these other restoration projects that I mentioned to you, where we're doing creek and runnel excavation, we partner with the Coastal Resources Management Council and local property owners, towns, municipalities, the town of Warren, Bristol, Barrington, Jamestown. Often we have the Department of Public Works operate the excavator. So it's a real nice combined effort to do these projects. And, of course, tons of volunteers and community support from watershed associations, our interns. We could not do this without our volunteer support.
If someone wanted to get involved with Salt Marsh restoration, how would they do that? Contact July Lewis to Save the Bay?
Contact July, and this morning, we had some neighbors from the Narrow River. They were out with us. They worked with us for a couple hours. We do what we call these dig days, especially early spring and early summer, and then again in the fall. And we do them both seasons, and we're doing them all over the state. So if you're interested in getting involved, just give July a call and we'll get you a shovel and try to find some boots that fit you, and you can come out and join us and get very dirty during the day.
All right, great. That's fantastic. I'll put in the description of this video July Lewis's email. You can contact her.
That would be great.
Thanks, Wenley. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming out today.
Yeah, of course. Welcome back. We are back at the aquarium with Abby and Adam. That's going to be it for today. As always, you can find us on Facebook, Save Bay Narragansett. You can find us on Twitter, Save the Bay RI. You can find us on Instagram with the same name, Save the Bay RI. You can find this podcast on iTunes.
Whoa.
Search Save the Bay or Save the Bay Podcast. You can find us there. We also have a YouTube version of it, so if you go to youtube.com and search Save the Bay, you'll find us there. There's really not a place you can't find us. So
we're everywhere.
We are everywhere.
Literally everywhere, guys.
Make sure you go to savebay.org/aquarium to register for the mystery feedings, which is July 21st from 5 to 6.
Yes.
5 to 6 p.m.
5 to 6 p.m. Make sure you sign up for that because it will be sold out. And make sure you stop down at the aquarium in Newport for all the fun-filled shark activities for the month of July.
Yep, you got to do it, guys. I'll be here almost every day, too, so you get to hang out with me.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Abby. Next time this podcast is shot, I will not be here. Abby will be manning the captain's seat. So
we'll see how that goes.
I think it's going to be great.
It'll go good.
It's going to be great. Until next time, I will talk to all of you very soon. Comment and rate and review this podcast.
Have a great day, guys.
Have a good one.